Welcome everyone to our newest AIM webinar. This one is we're going to talk a little bit about uh, uh, digging into an analysis example on vehicle health. But we're going to do it based on a little bit of a storyline, based on some recent AIM support calls that I worked with a gentleman on, and we're going to kind of walk through the process of how we started to chat about things, and then where the interaction went to, and where we kind of ended up. And so it'll be kind of a nice journey of a the from start to finish of a support call, and some of the different things we talked about. So that'll be kind of fun. So let's jump in and start to talk about it a little bit. There we go. I get a lot of emails, and so I was sitting around back in July, and the initial user contact for this came in as an email, and the fellow asked me, told me that he had an MXL2, was road racing a Fiat X19, and he wanted to connect and configure an AccuSump system, an oil system. He wanted to actually connect the valve that recorded when the AccuSump was active, and immediately that got me to thinking. It's been a topic I've wanted to grab some or find some data from, learn a little bit about. I've actually had them in race cars that I've driven in the past, but that was pre-data days for me, and so I've often wondered, how that looked and how we could use the data to make that work better. So when he started asking about this, it was like, oh, but I'm gonna jump in as deep as I can here, and see what I can do to help as much as I can. So we kind of went back and forth a couple of times and kind of started to think about it, and his general questions brought it up. He had an MXL2, and so this is one of the things that support here at AIM, as some of you know well, is priority number one. But it's also kind of difficult, because what one user has is that form of motorsports, the car that they're working with, the type of sensor they have, what AIM system they have in the car. It's very hard to put a cookbook kind of a solution to everything, especially when you start, in his case, wanting to connect a sensor from the AccuSump up to his MXL2. And so he had some questions, and he was thinking, and it makes all sense in the world to me, since he was talking about an on and off, right? The AccuSump is either pushing oil into the engine, or it's not. So so off and on, right? So he was thinking it was going to be a digital channel, and but in effect, the way that the sensor worked was it was 0 voltage or 12 volts, and that's what we were picking up. So we talked about it, and got him to understand the difference between digital and analog. We can do both, but that analog was really what he needed to be focusing on, and he had the harnesses on his gauge that allowed him to have enough analog channels. He had a free analog channel. So what we started to talk about was, okay, how do we wire that up? He had not done that before, obviously. So I passed him some documents, and this wire goes to this, and this wire goes to that, and the pinouts and all the different things, and got that kind of up and running for him, and he was off and running. But of course, while we're talking, there was some other questions that he had, and some user interface stuff. Hey, this is a little frustrating for me here. This is a little frustrating for me here. He watches these videos, and there was times when he would watch a video that we would show Race Studio 3 and show, hey, just click on this and click on that, but his screen didn't look like that. So there was some user interface things that we needed to kind of get straightened out. He had his, and I've had it. He didn't do it, but we've had Race Studio 3 a couple times of other users that I've chatted with, where it went to simplified mode instead of advanced mode, and so his was set up in simplified mode, where he was just missing buttons that we were talking about. So we got him fixed up there, a couple other little things, and then he had just added a throttle position and a steering. So I supplied him with some some sensor calibration documents, the links that I placed in the chat box that are available for you there. So you can download those right off of our server. Those of you that are watching after this is done on YouTube later, those links will all be, any links we talk about here will be in the user, in the notes down below. So go ahead and take a look at there. And the so I got him those sensor calibration documents to get him up to speed. He had already done them and was in pretty good shape, but wanted to help him on that. So, and then he wanted to add an external mic to his SmartyCam, and that was something that we chatted about, some of my experience with doing that same thing and how I had used it in the past, and those opened up some ideas for him okay, yeah, let's. He wanted to do that, so he went to work on that as well. So some general support questions beyond what he started with is typically how these things work, and it happens 20, 30 times a day with the different techs. Me even less than others. So the kind of a standard way of doing it, but we really wanted to get into that and get him running on that AccuSump thing, which we did. So off he went, and everything seemed to be going well. He wrote me a note back, said that he had gotten everything kind of up and going, and then he had a race weekend, and the race weekend was at Daytona, and so he sends he made a post on Facebook, because I think he was out at the track. He made a Facebook post that his pre-calc gear function did not work when he was out at the track that morning, and that's a function that I kind of pushed for in Race Studio 3 and have been tickled pink with, and typically has been working very, very well for most people. So when I saw the post, I wrote him a note. I responded to the post, gave him my email address, and have him give me a call or drop me an email, and let's see if we can fix it. So he did, and so we started talking about it a little bit. And he sent me a data file. I wanted to see the data file and some configuration file so I could see exactly how he had it set up. And I checked everything in it, and it looked pretty good. His screen capture on the Facebook post actually looked like it was in pretty good shape. So I wanted to check it all out. But I thought, I would just rebuild his configuration and send it back. And so I thought I would jump in and take care of that, but we've had a few recent issues with Race Studio 3 where there can be a corrupt configuration here or there. So, and of course he was at a race weekend, so I wanted to do everything I could to get him fixed up and get him going. So I went to rebuild his configuration, and he had a fairly complex configuration on his MXL2. He's been playing with all sorts of things. He had 26 alarms. He had 4 status variables, but 3 math channels and shift lights and some other things that he had in there. So I copied it over into a brand new configuration and sent it to him. And he uploaded it, went out in the next practice, I think, and everything worked the next time out on the track. So, okay, all perfectly good. And one of the things that I did with him later, we'll add to the conversation a little bit later, but we talked about his gear shift lights and that there was an option for him to once he got the pre-calculated gear function working, he could actually change his shift lights to have them shift at different spots depending on the gear he was in. And in his car, it's fairly low horsepower, and so it takes quite a long time to roll through some of those gears. So we talked about maybe setting those RPMs a little bit different for the upper gears versus the lower gears. And then the other thing we did, something that some of you may not know, is when you don't want a light to work in a shift light, the way to turn that off so it doesn't come on at all, and in this case in 5th gear, when he was in 5th gear, we really didn't want those shift lights to come on because there's no 6th gear to shift to. So we put in, even though I told it had five gears, we put zeros in all of the 5th gear shift lights, and so he would get his shift lights up through 4th, and once he went to 5th, the shift lights were inoperable. So kind of a cool thing that I'm not sure if he implemented that yet or not, but we gave him that option. So we sent that to him. Everything was working pretty well for the rest of his weekend, which was pretty good. So then what happened is we went. He ran his race. We chatted a couple times with email and back and forth, and everything seemed to work well. And he even passed along a few more data files to me. And then Tuesday evening, after the Daytona race weekend, uh, I found a couple things in the data files that I saw that I wanted to chat with him about. Number one, make sure that everything was working fine. Chat with him about that. And then I wanted to get back to his AccuSump data and present to him the way that I set it up, and did the analysis and let him see some things. And some of it was a little bit concerning for me. And I actually made the decision while I was chatting with him in between his two races, race one on Saturday and race two on Sunday. I thought, he already knows he has oil pressure problems because he added the AccuSump, and but I was seeing some pretty frequent drops in oil pressure, and I decided not to pressure and push that information to him too hard, so to screw up his whole Sunday. So we wanted to talk about it on Tuesday evening. So the first thing we did, and the first thing I do whenever it's vehicle health things, I think a well set up channels report is really your first stop. You come into a channel report like we're showing here, and then and set it up for things that mean something to you, and you can just glance at and real quickly understand that you either exceeded something that you cared about or you didn't, right? So in this case here, he did 6 laps out on the track in the short race, and of course we always get the lap time and the distance, and then I typically put my min and max GPS speed just so I can see if a couple things it does for me. You can see it from the lap time, but if there's a yellow flag or something, you will see a full course yellow or something. You'll see it in the GPS speeds, and then minimum, maximum RPM, especially the maximum. Let's see if there was any over revs, and he got up there a few times fairly high. So something happened there. Well, we would want to dig into that. Water temperature, high, maximum water temperature. Did this thing get hot? It certainly did not. So all good. We kind of look at the lateral G's, left and right. Some people like to look at those real briefly in a channels report, not super focusing on the vehicle health, but always nice to look at. And then minimum oil pressure. There's some low numbers there, right? Yeah, I see that Matt said in the chat there are some low oil pressure numbers. Yep. So some pretty low oil pressure numbers. His maximums, pretty consistent. They almost always will drop a little bit as the oil temperature comes up, as the run goes. And then I always like to kind of put an average just so you can watch and see how much the average oil pressure drops. You can do that. And then the last one here on the channel report is an AccuSump count. I'll talk more about these math channels here in a little bit, but this is the number of times that the AccuSump actually triggered itself per lap in this race. And that's of course important, and that was something that he really wanted to know. And when did it do it? Why did it do it? All the typical things we would want to know as vehicle health. So as we look at this, a couple things that would jump out at me: those minimum oil pressures. We have to figure that out, right? And then the AccuSump hits, and then I don't cover it a ton in this talk today, but 89 or 8800 RPM spikes there at the beginning. It turns out it's got a fairly dirty RPM signal, and that those spikes up are what we were getting there. So don't worry about those values there too much, because they were just a single data point spike up and down. I did talk with him about that later, and we did another RPM channel that we did a rolling average on, and to pull some of those down and give him some more realistic numbers, and he could put those back into this channels report if he wanted to do that. So the channel report, always where I start. It's the fastest thing to get to. When I'm at the racetrack, the channel report is set up as a user profile, and it is the place where I save the user profile. So when I open up data, this is the first page that opens up to me. So that when you go ahead and hit the save button for saving of the save button's not shown here in the screen capture, but be in this one here, have it open, and click on the save. That is where your user profile will open from then on. So that's very, very handy. The next thing that I wanted to show him, and we chatted about why we were on a Zoom call, is I created an oil pressure custom time distance page. And so I hit the custom channel, and I set it up as a typical time distance page with the map, but it's all about oil pressure things. And of course I am a fan of. I typically put my speed trace at the top always. Just helps me understand where I'm at. I just glance at that and I know where I'm at the track. And then his oil pressure, and you can see the drops where they're happening. There's 4 of them here. 2 of them get low enough to have a AccuSump hit. The AccuSump is set up where it's at 0 millivolts when nothing is happening, and I think it's about 10,000 millivolts, or about 10 volts or so when it has about 10 looking at the scaling, about 10,000 millivolts or 10 volts when it releases, when it opens up that valve. So 2 times on this lap it had a AccuSump hit. So the AccuSump was on 2 times, and I also put the math channel of AccuSump count down here, and every time we have a hit on the AccuSump, I tried to, by the way, just some of you that are deep into math channels, we can do the count on any channel at all, but the trouble is when this went up, and if I were to zoom in on that AccuSump value, those millivolts are jaggedy at the top, and I could not filter down or get that enough where the AccuSump channel itself, every time I did a count, I would get like 15 counts, 15 hits for the AccuSump count. So I built another channel called AccuSump on, and so we just got a single up 0 or 1, and then I did the count based on that, which you'll see those in the math channels that I used here in just a bit. So the and the other thing that I like to do, I'm a pretty visual guy when it comes to data. That's my first look, is looking at the visual side. And I colorized this track map with the AccuSump on channel. So now all of a sudden we can see exactly where the AccuSump was hitting on these two AccuSump on channels, and you can see exactly where they are by the red color. So we know it's 2 right-hand corners. Both of these are right-hand corners. Does that tell us exactly why it's having this problem yet? Not yet. We have to dig in a little deeper. We know that we're having oil pressure problems. We know they're hitting in at least these 2 spots. And then remember, maybe somewhere else's. Remember, we've seen 4 oil pressure drops in the previous slide. Oops, I'm sorry. In this slide, we've seen 1, 2, 3, 4. The other 2 just were not deep enough to trigger the AccuSump. So we want to know where those are at. So this is another way I like to do it, and again, a custom time distance page. I've named it oil pressure, and save it as part of my user profile. So every time I open it up, it looks exactly like this for me. If oil pressure is a question in your with your car, or water temperature, or anything else that you have, build a page on the user profile to open this up directly. Makes this very, very quick when it comes time to go. So what's the next thing I wanted to kind of talk about was the math channels themselves. When we're going to do something like this, I'd like you to see the math channels, and you can build them. If you have something like this, you can use these math channels to kind of build off of. But first, I needed to turn the AccuSump on the channel. I needed to create that from the raw data of the AccuSump. And the way that I did that is I just called it AccuSump on right here. And then and it reports as a 1 when the AccuSump millivolt exceeds 10,000 or 1,000 millivolts in this case. I wanted it to trigger as early as possible, right? 10,000 would be the 10 volts. So I'm telling you, if it gets above 1 volt, please, turn the AccuSump on channel on. And the way that math channel works is just AccuSump in parentheses, the double quotations. That tells that it's an AIM analog channel. It's an AIM channel in your data, and the unit that I want it to be in is in millivolts, and it's got the greater than symbol, and then 1,000. So whenever it exceeds 1,000, we're going to get a 1 in the data. Okay, and this is what it looks like when you set it all up. By the way, the frequency. We talk about this sometimes. I'm a big fan of, for things like the on-off type of things, I maybe turn up the sample rate a little bit in Race Studio 3, but a good habit to always be is whatever the core value of if the AccuSump millivolt channel where the channel was being turned on here, this oil pressure, I'm sorry, the AccuSump actual channel, if it was at 10 hertz or 20 hertz, you should tend to follow the same math channel sample rates when building the math channels. The only exception that I do with that is when I have an on-off type of thing. I want to capture that on as soon as I get it, and I want it to that line to go straight up and come across and then back down. So I tend to turn on those on and off type channels a little bit faster. Then the AccuSump count channel, if I back up again, here's where we're buzzing along at 0. It hasn't hit at this first part of the lap, and then when it hits, I want it to jump up and then record 1, and then record 2, and then be ready to record another one. Right? There is a fairly new math channel that we can use called the lap edge counter. Any channel that you have that has that goes up and down, you can count those. You do them on rising or falling, or you can do both. And in this case, I use the lap edge counter math channel, and the channel that I used was AccuSump on. It has to be in quotes because it's a channel. Now it's been created by the math channel, but it is a channel inside the data, and I wanted to count only when it went up. I don't want to. It's never going to go down, obviously, in this particular case. Or actually, it was right. It was going up, and then it came down, and I wanted to skip that down change. I only wanted the rising. Okay, so with that said, I only wanted the rising. AccuSump on, comma, rising. Another pretty cool math channel to count things. You can do gear shifts. You can do, anything you want to count. We can work around and build a way to do these counts for you, and that pretty powerful channel. So hopefully you might feed those into some of your data analysis in the future if there's something you want to count, how many times things have happened. Ray Phillips has given us a math channel webinar in the past where he used that quite a bit on lifts of the throttle coming off of corners. It was a very interesting webinar. Maybe we can get a link to that one down in the chat. I'll try to put it into the show notes as well. And then we've got these low oil pressure problems, and then we kind of talked about how we recognized them. We made the AccuSump on happen, and then we counted them. So now we know where they're at, but we really want to know why. Why is this oil pressure happening? At the end of this, this user needs to go back and try to fix this, right, or understand it better, and understand what is possibly what the problem is. So the next thing that we built, and we were chatting with him during this Zoom call, showing him these different things, is I built a scatter plot, and I called it oil pressure. And there's but using two different scatter plots, and I like to put the channels down here at the bottom of it, so when I can click in the different maps, or I can click and drag inside of here, and the X goes around where this is happening. So I tend to put the time distance graph at the bottom, but you don't need to. And then so let's talk about these two graphs. The first one here is, and on both of them, it's oil pressure here on the y-axis. So this is low oil pressure. This is high normal oil pressure. 60 psi up here, down to 10 psi down here below. So but I put that against two different channels. The first one is I did lateral acceleration, left and right, GPS-based channel, but very accurate. And it was, so this is the oil pressure versus the turning, and left and right. And if you notice here, if you look closely, there was one drop a little bit over here where it started to come down and got to about 30 psi. But the way I colorize these is based on the millivolts from the AccuSump channel. You can see here the scaling here, 2,000 to 12,000. Red being the AccuSump is fully active, and down here in blue the AccuSump is not active. And you can see that all of the AccuSump hits all came in positive 1.0 or right-hand corners. All of them did. All the rest of this, even this one that had a little bit of a drop, and this one here had a little bit of a drop, but every time it had a problem, it was in right-hand corners. Okay, so but that's only one piece of it. That's one force of the oil in the oil pan, and so let's think about the next one, GPS longitudinal G's. Now, so this is oil pressure up the y-axis as we did the same on the other one, but this one is based on braking. Again, you had no oil pressure losses while at any time up in here, but the only time we had low oil pressure was when we came down here and we were dipping down in the lower parts of the this would be the real heavy braking is over here. It was not under heavy braking. It was when he was not seeing the low oil pressure. A little bit of below zero, so a little bit of braking on this piece of it here, but a bulk of them were during acceleration. So in reality, it's right-hand corners, and for the most part, when he's accelerating or just off the brakes and just starting to accelerate. So you start to fine tune on what is the issue that is giving him the problems, and we start to look, and you can see this cursor here. So I put the cursor in the, of course they're linked together. So I came over here, I clicked right in the scatter plot. I thought, well, okay, well, where did this one happen? And so I clicked on it, and you can come over here and you can see the blue dot is the position that's fairly small on your graphs, but it's turn one coming off of the banking at Daytona heading into the infield. So that is a left-hand corner that it started to lose some oil pressure. Remember, the bulk were in the right-hand corners, the two right-hand corners. The boom where it ticked here was this one right here. And this one here where it really lost oil pressure was on this right-hand corner here, and this left-hand corner going into the infield, it still had some drops there. So it's telling us that if this would have been in this corner longer, it might have actually dropped as well. So there's, for the most part, right-hand corners, but the left-hand corners a little bit too. So that wet sump oil pan, there is some needs, or he's low oil levels, or something is happening, right? That he needs to review. So the scatter plot is a very, very valuable thing. You can see certain things in a normal time distance plot. You can kind of see where they're happening, but you don't get the trends. So yes, this happened. This is how low it got. This is when it triggered, and this is how many it was, and we can kind of see some things. We can even see where they happened, where they were triggered, based on this view I've stored here. But you really need to dig in and try to figure out why this was happening. So this was helpful. And then he had sent me some more data as the weekend went on, and so he also did a couple of different things. One of them, he had thought about it a little bit, and he put an additional 1 quart of oil in the sump, because he's the way that the AccuSump was working and some other things, it may have been pulling some oil out after he had checked his oil levels. So he added 1 quart of oil for race 2, and so now we went right back to that same channel report that we talked about earlier. And here's race 1 that we looked at already. Had those 2 hits for the first 3 laps, and only 1 hit for the last 3. And now we look at the second race, and we can kind of scroll across this. The one we of course would want to look at first is the minimum oil pressure, and yeah, it's down in the teens, but certainly higher than it was in the first race, and it was even it was almost double the race length. So there was a lot more heat in the motor, and other things that typically would have, low oil pressure would be coming down a little bit, and still the minimum oil pressure was a little bit higher. So that 1 quart of oil got him partially there, right? As he's been digging into and looking into different things, he's been understanding what's going on, and that really did help. And so that's pretty handy. The max oil pressures were very, very similar if you look at those numbers. So of course it didn't pick up anything there, and the averages are about the same. But there are some laps in the second race where there were no hits of the AccuSump. Then some were ones, and they had 1 lap that had 2. We bring up that data here in a moment if we want to go look at that and see where that happened. But interesting to see the improvement just of now that he understood it and started to kind of think it through from doing some data work. He okay, I think I understand that there was some issues with the maybe the oil level. So I think there is more to that story as the week or two since we've done this and starting to understand what else is going on. So the conclusion on this was kind of interesting. Number one, he was thankful that about his new MXL2 configuration. We were able to send that to him while he was at the track, and got him up and running, which was good. And we chatted a little bit, and his new general Race 303 understanding was helpful to him. So that was kind of a good thing. And he was really glad that we analyzed his engine oiling concern. He knew there was kind of a problem. That's why he added the AccuSump. So it wasn't totally new to him, obviously, but he was trying to find that solution. But the data was allowed him to come in and give him a much better idea, and understood exactly when things were going on. And the best news is he won his Sunday race number 2. This picture of his car, and him making his victory lap out there. So, and the last data point here which was kind of interesting. He later found out, went out and did some research and watched a Jesse Prather video about AccuSump setup, which was I had watched it independent of him, actually, same time, because I was still trying to learn about some different things. But he learned from different setup things that he had done that there was even more improvement that he could do. So so he even thought that his oil sump level was lower than he thought, and that 1 quart might not have been enough. And the way it was set up, that the way it was going to shoot in the oil when low oil pressure was found was going to be better by the way his new setup information was set up. So I thought it was a fantastic opportunity to work with him and get to start chatting about the number one, all of his configuration issues, and we got those all straightened out. And I rewrote a few of his math channels and some of his status variables and some other things that he had there, but he had some distinct wants and needs that he wanted on his gauge to feed him information while he was going, and we were able to and he had taken several cracks at some of them, so we were able to get rid of some and boil it right down to what he really did want at the time. So it worked out. The conclusion was really good for him. So I thought it was an interesting story where we were able to walk through this and find out exactly that where the oil pressure problems were, and this was something that I in road racing, which a good chunk of the people here that are watching here today are watching online later. In road racing, you really have a left and a right and a brake and forward. But if you're in other forms of motorsports, the one that I ran into at least twice that I've solved some problems for some folks. There was some times when you go back and in off-road racing, they were everything was fine, but they got on some tracks that had some really long jumps where they got really high, but they were high speed, so they were in the air a long time. And when the truck went up in the air, the oil in the dry sump, and it was a dry sump tank, the oil, everybody works hard to get those your oil pickups either low in the pan or low in the dry sump tank. But the trouble is when they really got these things in the air and they were up there, the oil all went up to the top of the dry sump tank, and they were actually picking up air from the oil all going up. So there is if the type of racing that you're doing, whether it's rally or off-road or some of those type of thing where you have some up and down motion as well, make sure you check your x-axis, the vertical axis as well, right? So make sure if you see some oil pressure drops, you keep plugging in information till you figure out why you're seeing these drops. And this goes across not just in this particular specific question of this, but if you're having fuel pressure problems or water temperature problems or whatever it is, you got to dig in and figure out why the problem is happening, right? So you keep on bringing up data and looking at it in different ways until you can find something that shows you that trend and shows you why certain things have happened. And there are some tracks. There are some road racing tracks too. Lime Rock is probably one that I know Matt runs it a lot, and I seen somebody else was there earlier in the chat. But you go up and there is when we raced there, my son and I raced there a while back, many years ago. There was a spot there, even in the low horsepower cars we were running, that the cars were getting off the ground. It was just a short time, but not enough time to get the oil up. But you did have to worry about that a little bit there as well. So, so think about that. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, maybe we'll jump into the configuration live in the live data, but some of these 26 alarms and the status variables that he had built, the onboard math channels, those were something that we spent a pretty good amount of time on, and fine-tuned those and got those really working well for them. So we'll probably jump into the live data. Just to remind everybody, if you have a question that you might want to have answered, I haven't been able to follow the chat very well, but if you throw it into the question and answer box, we probably have a few minutes. So the conclusion, again, we talked about that. So let's jump into some live data real quickly, and let me show you where we can actually look at it a little bit closer. The first thing is the oil pressure tab that I built. I clipped some of that out, so you may not have been able to see it before. So I have at the normal time distance that I build in some different things. Maybe it's throttle position and RPM, and there's that RPM spike that I talked about. That was the reason he was getting a high RPM a couple of times on the outlaps there. But we can see some different things here, but this is just the standard one. So I built a custom one, and came in and I just named it oil pressure. And now we can come in there and we can zoom in, and let's go look at the first of the horseshoes there, and we'll pull this over a little bit. And here's what his oil pressure was doing, and it started about here. So he's through his braking for the most part, and he's starting to turn in, and the lateral G's, and we could throw lateral G's up here, and lateral G's. Let's put in GPS lateral G's. We'll just leave them up there at the top. We can see it starting to build right there. He's already turning in way back, starting back in here. He's starting to turn in a little bit of G's, not very much, but a little bit. And then he really starts to ramp up the G's in this area, and that's right about when the oil pressure starts to go. He's just a few tenths of a second probably after really turning in and being on the brakes, all that oil up in the front of the pan, and then he starts to turn as well, and boom, the oil pressure starts to come down. And when it gets down to, I think he had it set at 15 psi, and something like that, and then when it hit that, the AccuSump was triggered, and you can see the oil went in. It stopped it from going down to zero, and it kept some oil pressure in the galley. There's some adjustments he talked to me that he was going to do some different things with to have that pressure be either longer or more oil, less oil. There's some ways you can adjust those things, and you can see by the AccuSump on, and then the count goes up to that one hit. Okay, if we back out a little bit, let's go over here where the second one happened, and you can see that the way that I do that is I zoom in, not too heavily, and here you can start to see where he starts to turn in is up in this area. Oil pressure is nice and good, and he's probably hitting the brakes. The speed is certainly coming down, so he's on the brakes, and so you can see the oil pressure, while looking nice and smooth, starts to get just a little bit noisy, and then boom, it falls down in a hurry when he gets up there about 0.88 G's in that right-hand corner again, under braking. Okay, comes down, you can see right where the AccuSump started to feed in the oil, and then and it started to drop off. Probably was running out of the oil, right? That's available to it, right? At some point, and so it started to drop down. But the corner was over, luckily, and it went back up to full oil pressure as he was exiting the corner. And the G's were still up a little bit, but he's on throttle, so it's probably a combination of mostly braking and left and right hand corners that is really pushing the oil away from the pickup. Because here he's still up a ways in his G's, lateral G's, and the oil pressure came up very quickly, probably right about here. And that's right here is where he got off the brakes, and the speed trace, there's the V-min at the bottom right there. He's starting to throttle back up, and the oil pressure came back up right about there. So you just dig in a little bit, right? So let's look at the other one where we started to see one. Here's where he started to have a little bit of an oil pressure drop. So let's zoom in a little bit on that one. And you can see that he's long into the, let me pull that over a little bit, long and deep into the braking zone. He's coming down at speed, pulling a lot of speed out of it, a lot of speed. And the oil pressure starts to flutter finally right about in this area where he is at, 0.75 negative or left-hand corner. Right in here is where it's showing. But it never does drop below that 15 PSI, right? It only came down to 43 from a normal high of 55 to 60. But you can certainly see that it's right on the edge, So he needs to be careful there, obviously. So that's kind of interesting. And then here's where he's turning the here's a little bit of a right hand corner, right? And darn if it doesn't start to drop a little bit just from that right hand corner. It comes down a little bit and then turns left, and it stays down there a little bit, starts to come back up. So we can dig into these oil pressure problems and kind of take a look. It's kind of interesting. And remember, there was one more here towards the end. Where would everybody think that one might be, right? The other place where you turn at Daytona at a fairly high G rate, back, left, right, and while it did not dip down low enough to get the AccuSump to kick in, you can see him turning. There's a left-hand corner as he's turning into the chicane, and you can see the left-hand G's. And the oil pressure is dropping, but the RPM might be dropping too. But we would want to turn on the RPM value to see if this is RPM related or not. And then boom, switches over to a right, and then you can see by the zigzags that the oil pressure is actually missing. It's gulping a little bit of air every once in a while there. So it's on the edge on this right-hander as well. So that's the first race that he used the system over the weekend. Here's a late lap. It only did it on one of the corners. It didn't get it down here. But if I click there, look how close it was. It was right on the edge of hitting the AccuSump. But it's not colorized, so it didn't get deep enough there. But it actually got a little deeper in the chicane, and about the same on the end of turn one. So you can kind of see some of those differences. Then let's open up the second test. Let me close that one and open up the second test, the race on Sunday. And we can and here's where he added a quart of oil, and while we got less of those hits, right? The AccuSump didn't hit as much. The oil pressure problems are still there. They're just not big enough to get down and hit that what I think was probably 15 PSI. So let's go into the first of the that's the second one, horseshoe. There's the first one. Coming here, you can see it got down to about 20 PSI or so. Still dropping, even though he added that quart of oil. And we were able to dig into this with him and took a look at it and figure out that it's still doing it. But boy, he made good gains, right? And then the second horseshoe over here, the south horseshoe, I don't think they call it the south horseshoe. I think this is the west horseshoe, right? But that one was right on the edge of it hitting. If we pick a different lap, I think there was one there that I think this one had two hits, if I remember right. Nope, that one didn't. There's the one. Lap 9 still got it twice, but boy, it was much shorter. It came down and went right back up. But it did get two hits of the AccuSump on that particular one. This is why let's go to the channel report. This is where I would open it up typically first and start to look at this, and then and see what it looked like. And okay, well, it all looks pretty good, better than it was certainly before. But the power of the data is being able to open up and have the two tests back to back after his change. Right now, you can come in and take a look at the minimum oil pressures and see what the adding of the 1 quart of oil did for it for the second day, and the numbers here right in the data. We could go into the oil pressure graph, and then the two best laps of the day. We can see the differences here, and understand what the oil pressure losses look like. The Sunday is the blue one. The second day, and you see that it dropped down and got into it a little bit. The AccuSump hit, but boy, you can see that it came later and it picked up sooner. but it barely got down below the 15 at that one time, about 10 psi where I've got it clicked right now. So you can compare those real quickly and see what it looks like. And so user profiles, being able to come in and see these kind of things and jump right into the channel report and understand exactly what went on, very helpful, very, very, very handy. I want to kind of end this with going into his configuration real quickly and talk about some of the stuff that he had kind of played with a little bit and wanted to understand. And this is the AccuSump. We just picked the channel and we set it up, and just under voltage and generic 0 to 12 volts. We sampled at 20 hertz, and we wanted a measure of millivolts. That's what some of the different stuff in AIM really kind of wants. So we were able to set up this AccuSump channel really quickly. He wired it in, and it worked perfectly fine. So wanted to kind of talk about that. And then some of the other things that he struggled with a little bit was one thing that a lot of people miss, and the track that he was at, which was Daytona, the track width is on wide open courses like that. You can go a little bit wider on that track width, because if we jump back in here real quickly, just to look, the start finish line is way up here in the. Let me get out to a full lap here. Best lap. The start finish line is up here, and if you take a measure and you look at, if you come down pit lane and you want to trigger a lap during a pit stop, your properties, your parameters need to have this trigger, and this is about 300 and some feet right to the pit wall. So if we go back into that parameter here, that's why I set a lot of tracks fairly wide, is so when you come down pit lane, you get that. And I just go into Google Earth and I do the measuring tool in Google Earth. I find out what it is for that specific track, and 300 feet works at Daytona to make sure we always get something on the pit lane. So kind of a handy little thing. So do that. And the other thing he had built quite a few of is he wanted his shift light set up. Something that worked for him. He likes having them come from the outside to the inside, and he had a couple of them that were inconsistent. I like those to be the same amount every time, so you can kind of watch the timing of it and know exactly when you're going to shift. Kind of tweaked a little bit of that for him. He may or may not have liked that, and then of course then we did add in the image that I showed you a little bit earlier, where we did them per gear. So I already talked about that in the presentation. But the other one that we went in and did a lot of work on, he wanted a light and a message for when the AccuSump was on. He wanted any number of things, and so he had a lot of really pretty handy alarms and events that he had set up, which was pretty cool. I really enjoyed that he had done that. And then the status variables, he wanted a low voltage one. He wanted when he was on track. This was one that a lot of people are starting to use quite a bit. When the RPM is greater than 500 and the speed is greater than 15, you pick your numbers that you do not exceed in the paddock area, and then you can kind of call that on track and maybe build it and try it a little bit and see if that makes something that you can do some status variables. Now only show me low oil pressures or something you want to trigger, and use your on track yes or no to kind of trigger away some of the different things that you don't want to see when you're sitting in the paddock area. And the in paddock one was the opposite of that pretty much, right? If the RPM values were between 500 and 3,000 and the car was less than 25 miles per hour, he thought that was a good time to make the assumption that you were not out on the track, but you're driving around the paddock. So he has an on track and an in paddock setup there. That was pretty handy. So the a low voltage status variable, and then of course his math channels that he had built. He wanted some predictive lap timing stuff on there as well, and so we built those for him. So pretty handy. I don't see any questions up there. I think we're pretty close to where I wanted to kind of cover. I hope that some of you got something out of maybe some of the analysis stuff that we were talking about. Talking with Russ there, it worked out pretty well for him. he got some information, not just his AccuSump thing fixed, but he was then had somebody to chat with about some other questions that he had, and we were able to do it over the weekend and during his racing. So we were able to work on some stuff and get him understanding it a little bit better. But mainly that oil pressure problem, which is a problem that he really needed to know about and needed to resolve before he had engine oil problems, obviously, and blew up an engine. So very, very happy that we were able to help him with, and that AccuSump information was something that I've been wanting to look at in the data for a long time. We all have sensors that we haven't worked with. You can probably think of some that you have wanted to see, but you don't have the data from, right? So this was one of mine. That AccuSump, I wanted to see what that looked like and work with a little bit. So I appreciate Russ giving us the data and letting us take a look at it, and happy to help him. And it was pretty cool. So let's chat about the training videos as usual. This one will be up on YouTube just as fast as I can get it done this evening. Go to YouTube, AIM Data, and subscribe to the channel, and you can turn on the notifications, and you'll get any new videos that come out. You'll get a message that they're there, and we put these out there as often as we can. So pretty. The other thing there is they have a search bar there, and I work hard at making sure I code all of these things as best I can with all the right words. So if you really want to look up something on oil pressure or AccuSump, you type that in there, and this video will come to the top of the search bar. So if it's something that we've talked about in the past and you knew we talked about it, just type it into the search bar. I think you're going to find that you can find the YouTube page actually does a pretty good job on the search. Customer support, we just had big weekend last weekend with the SCCA runoffs. I know a couple people that are watching here today were there, and we had a couple of AIM techs there that were pretty busy, and luckily the weather was great and the racing was good, and we had a good time. So but that's what we do. We're out at the racetracks as much as we can, and if we're not there, make sure you give us a call, drop us an email, whatever it happens to be. We want to make sure that we get you the information that you need to get to understand your AIM hardware and software as best you can. So we're always here to help. Next webinar is going to be Tuesday, October 28th at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Ray Phillips, Precision Driving Analytics, is going to be joining us. Ray comes and joins us two or three times a year and gives us some really cool topics to talk about, and he's going to focus it on segment-based math channels. But of course, he's going to use that in some analysis-based things where he always builds some really cool math channels. I always learn something when Ray joins us, and I'm looking forward to him joining us in a couple of weeks. So make sure you join us for that next webinar on the 28th of October. Contact information. If I've said something that you might want, or you didn't get some of the links with some of the stuff that we put into the chat, drop me a note. I'm happy to answer and send you back the information and get the information back to you, or any other questions you might have. Drop us a note, and we'll get you what you need. So I appreciate everybody coming, and had a great time, and would look forward to seeing you at the next one with Ray. Talk to you guys soon. Thanks, Matt, for being in the background, taking care of answering questions. Appreciate it. And we will see you next time. Talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.